Meanwhile, on the comic box, we might actually have an answer to where the X-Men have gone. Even more comics are coming to television. And yes, Superman's glasses would have worked. Bop-a-doo, dop-a-doo, dop-a-doo, comics. Hey everyone, welcome to the Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network. I'm Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek, and as always, we got so much stuff to talk about. So let's jump straight into some comic book news, starting with Marvel. Like I said in the intro there, we may have an answer as to when we can expect another X-Men comic. We do know that the upcoming Inhumans vs. X-Men event is happening, but we have no idea what's going on beyond that, and there seems to be no X-Men books outside of like Old Man Logan or the female-led Wolverine comic right now. There's no team book. So we know very little, but Marvel has released a teaser image of what looks like another event following Inhumans vs. X-Men called X-Men Inhumans Resurrection, with the X being the X-Men logo and the O having Black Bolt's sort of lightning marks on the inside. And that's it. We don't know. We don't know if this is going to be an ongoing, if it's going to be one of those banner things where there actually are X-Men comics coming and they're just going to bear this sort of as a banner along the top, sort of like Second Coming or some of the Civil War tie-in books, that sort of thing. But we have no idea. At the very least, if you're an X-Men fan, you can rest assured that Inhumans vs. X-Men is not the end. Moving over to Marvel movie news, this is just kind of fun. I'm really digging this story. In just over a month from now, we're recording this at the beginning of September. By we, I mean me and my microphone and my monitor, I guess. But in just over a month, a documentary is coming to, and it said streaming services. I'm hoping that means Netflix. But it's a documentary called Doomed, the untold story of Roger Corman's Fantastic Four. Now, this film is sort of a part of certainly Marvel Cinematic, but just sort of comic book history in general. For those unaware, the story goes something like this. When you buy the rights to a property like Fantastic Four, often that agreement has a clause in it or something that says that you only have so many years in order to do something with that property, otherwise the rights return to whomever you bought them from. So Fox had this issue. They had purchased the rights to the Fantastic Four, or I guess leased them, rented them, whatever the proper legal term would be. They paid for the rights, and they were holding on to them, but they were taking too long, and the rights were going to revert back to Marvel unless they did something. So they went through the entire process of writing, casting, and shooting a Fantastic Four movie in the early 90s that was never meant to be released or seen by anybody. It was done strictly as a legal maneuver, and somehow they got Roger Corman to direct it. Now, I actually have a friend who owns a bootleg copy, and you can pretty much get a copy of this film at any comic book convention, and I'm sure there's plenty of places online you could get it as well. But I personally have yet to see it. We were going to have a movie night at some point. It just never happened. But this documentary then is sort of in the vein of The Death of Superman Lives, which told the story of that Tim Burton Superman film with a screenplay written by, amongst many other people, Kevin Smith, was going to star Nicolas Cage as Superman, and it just sort of stopped in mid-production. So similar to that, which was actually a really good documentary, this will give us a look inside a film that was made but was never meant to be seen. So I am really looking forward to that. Keep an eye out on your favorite streaming services for Doomed, the untold story of Roger Corman's Fantastic Four. Marvel TV news. We should all know by now that Ghost Rider is coming to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but don't expect it to be a direct translation from the comics. First, keep in mind that this is going to be the latest incarnation of the character, Robbie Reyes, who drives a muscle car instead of a motorcycle. But it goes even further than that. Executive producer Jed Whedon says that they're going to do their own spin on the character. And that was his quote, our own spin on the character. So I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that spin will not only include as little CGI as possible, just because you're dealing with the television budget, but that maybe Ghost Rider will be an Inhuman this time around. because that kind of seems to be the thing that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is doing as far as all of their superhumans, metahumans, whatever you want to call them on the show. They all seem to be Inhumans. So that's my guess. But again, as I've said in the past, I don't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It is on my Netflix queue, but I just haven't gotten to it yet. In any case, the show returns for its third season? Or something like that. I feel like it's been on the air longer than that, but maybe I'm wrong. In any case, it returns to ABC September 20th, and I do believe they're going to really throw Ghost Rider in there right off the bat. So if you're a Robbie Reyes fan, September 20th. Let's move on. If you're an 80s/90s kid like me, you might remember a team known as the New Warriors. Now, the team changed up over the years, and they were actually the catalyst, a battle of theirs, rather, was the catalyst for the first Civil War, not in the movie, obviously, but in the comic books. But in any case, the team included heroes like Firestar, yes, that Firestar from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Night Thrasher, Nova, and Speedball, who is just an interesting character. But it looks like Marvel wants to turn this book into a half-hour comedy on television that would also include Squirrel Girl, who is enjoying quite a renaissance these days. TV Line describes the series thusly. So here's a quote from TV Line. "The junior version of the Avengers, a superhero squad made up of teenagers, one of whom would include Doreen Green." And that's the end of that quote. Doreen Green, obviously, being the real name of Squirrel Girl. Now, interestingly, this is possibly the first time that Marvel has made a show that they plan to shop around to the networks rather than, for the most part, they make the deal first. People agree to at least entertain the pilot or whatever. Agree to help develop the show, and each of the Marvel shows we currently have were made specifically for that network, as far as I'm aware. So this is going to be sort of an interesting way to see this, and then if this is also going to be a tie-in to the MCU somehow. Another thing we do not know here is whether or not this show is replacing the other half-hour comedy Marvel was talking about making, Damage Control. I'm thinking maybe that's the case, because we do know that NBC is doing a DC Universe half-hour sitcom called Powerless, and where Damage Control is sort of about the people who have to go, they're regular people that have to go in and clean up after all of these superhero battles. Powerless is about insurance agents who have to deal, again, with damage done by superheroes and supervillains in their battles. So I almost wonder if maybe Marvel pumped the brakes on Damage Control and said, well, it's going to be far too similar to Powerless, and now decided to do a team of teenage superheroes instead. I don't know. That is complete speculation. I did not read that anywhere, but it would, I guess, sort of make sense. I also, finally for Marvel news, I read a short review on comicbook.com of the first 7 episodes of Luke Cage. It was an overview. It didn't get into the nitty-gritty. And it was very positive. They gave them 5 out of 5 stars. So I really don't want to get my hopes up too far, because that's always a bad thing when you set the bar, too high for yourself. But Netflix has really been killing it with the Marvel shows, and they sort of raised the bar with Daredevil and Jessica Jones anyway. I'm happy to read good things about the show. I'm really looking forward to it, but unlike the guys at comicbook.com, who I guess got in early, we don't get to see it until it comes out on Netflix in its entirety on September 30th. DC Comics. Hey kids, love the 1970s Wonder Woman television show? Probably not, because it probably came out before you were born. But if you have a love of the show, if you're an older person listening to this podcast, that's mean of me to say, but I assume we have a pretty wide demographic, right? So if you are a fan of Wonder Woman and or the Bionic Woman, well then, good news! Because they're getting a comic book together. It's an agreement between DC and Dynamite Comics, and this will be their second collaboration following the Batman 66 meets the Green Hornet series, which I'm guessing must have sold well if they're doing the 77 Wonder Woman, I think it was 77 Wonder Woman, and the Bionic Woman. I never watched either show, so I have no frame of reference there, but it seems neat. And of course, they're doing a bunch of cool variant covers drawn by Alex Ross and other artists. So there's definitely something there. It's just I don't have nostalgia for that show because it came out well before I was born. A new study at the University of York indicates that if you don't personally know someone, it's difficult to tell them apart from other similar-looking people if they have had a subtle change to their appearance. That subtle change in particular for this study, a pair of glasses. So participants in the study were shown side-by-side photos of people, I'm guessing not from the same angle, and then they had to tell you whether or not it was the same person in both photos. And then some people were shown photos where in one photo they were wearing glasses and in one they weren't. And in this situation, because they didn't personally know the people in the pictures, participants had a harder time telling if both pictures were of the same person. Now granted, it went from an 80% success rate when both photos either did or did not have glasses, down to a 74% success rate for the pair of pictures where only one had the glasses, but still, that's actually kind of a pretty big gap. I mean, still not for like Lois Lane versus Superman because she's a reporter and sees him close up all the time. But point being, the study says, and so this is a quote from the study, and oh boy, I guess it's the University of York, and that's in the United Kingdom. Do I have to do a bad accent? Yes, I do. While we may still find it hard to believe that the inhabitants of Metropolis are unable to match Clark Kent with the numerous appearances of Superman in newspapers and on television, we can at least understand why Kent has chosen glasses as his aid to anonymity. So there you go. I don't know if that was a good accent. I didn't want to go too deep. Don't want it to be offensive. I have learned that I actually have listeners from the UK, which is a bit of news that I don't think I'll share. Maybe later on Twitter. There might be a thing there, but not for right now. So there you go. Superman's glasses would at least a little bit work, especially if you consider there's no definite picture of the person, if they're all blurry, whatever, as he's flying through the sky. That, yeah, it is kind of tough if you see somebody sort of from afar blurry and then see somebody else up close wearing glasses. You're not necessarily going to know that it's the same person. So hooray for DC Comics. Last piece of DC news from the comic book world. That is, this week Superman 6 served as the official introduction of Jonathan Kent, Superman's son, as the new Superboy. He'll then go on to star in Super Sons alongside Damian Wayne, Batman's son, and the current Robin. I really kind of dig the costume in this. It screams Saturday morning cartoon. It's got very much like, and I say this never having seen the show, but like that sort of Ben 10 kind of feel. It has the feel of a costume you would see in a kid's cartoon today. So here's hoping that that'll catch some eyes and will serve to bring some younger readers into the comic book fold. One of us. DC movie news. Greg Berlanti, that fellow who produces all of the DC TV shows these days, is working on a Booster Gold movie. He is a hero-ish guy who was a football player in the future, who then stole armor, a flight ring from the Legion of Superheroes, and a time machine, and then traveled back to our time in order to try and become famous. So he's not really, his whole thing is he's doing it for the fame. If you're looking for live-action interpretations, he was on a couple episodes of Smallville. If you're looking for an animated appearance, he was in at least, I know, in a couple episodes of Justice League Unlimited, but one in particular that was just about him. That was a very wonderful episode. And so now it looks like he might get his own movie. Now, this comes after a Booster Gold TV show was in development for the Sci-Fi Channel, but it never really got off the ground. So I don't know if they just took that idea and decided, well, we're going to try and do a movie with it now. But the one thing we do know for sure is that it is not going to be connected to the current DC Extended Universe movies. So the current Justice League and Batman v Superman, that whole universe. So it's a DC movie, but not connected to those, which is kind of odd because, I mean, I would hope that at the very least there are other superheroes in the universe this movie is made in, because the whole point is he's going back in time to become a superhero and figures his knowledge of the future, he can just go stop crimes before they happen and that sort of thing. I read some things online suggesting or theorizing that it could be connected to the current CW DC television shows, and the character does have some pretty strong ties, no spoilers, but some pretty strong ties to Rip Hunter, who is kind of the main character in DC's Legends of Tomorrow, but we'll have to sit and wait because saying a movie is in development does not mean at all that it's actually going to get made. Couple pieces of DC TV news. First, and I didn't even know that this was a thing, but apparently there's a service called the Warner Archive, which is a print-on-demand service for DVDs and Blu-rays that they don't think deserve or will sell well to actually have a full release. So if you're looking for Warner titles and you don't see them on store shelves, apparently there's this service where it might exist and you might be able to just hit, yes, make me a DVD, and it will print one and send it your way, which is really cool. So long as the prices aren't like super high. If the prices are totally insane, then that's kind of harsh. But in any case, if you are a fan of Constantine, the show that lasted a single season on NBC, which we'll actually talk about in this week's topic, an ad currently running in the back of DC Comics says that you can pick up the series soon from the Warner Archive, along with The 100, iZombie, and Lucifer, which we'll also talk about in this week's topic. Hint, hint. Unfortunately, and I think this is kind of dumb, you should not expect to hear the show as you first saw it. Sort of like how we'll see shows on streaming on Netflix, and like, I'm a Supernatural fan, and you'll watch some of the earlier seasons of Supernatural, and you know that, like, it's an AC/DC song or something, and instead you get this generic rock music. Well, that is because the studio doesn't want to bother paying for the rights to that music in another medium. This is what is apparently happening with Constantine. Evidently, a new set of musicians was brought in to write new music for the show so that any of the recognizable songs that you may have heard during the show is not going to be on the DVD, which means when you see the DVD or the Blu-ray of Constantine, you are not watching the show as it originally aired, which bothers me because that's sort of, in my opinion, that's kind of like doing the special editions of the Star Wars movies, where he's like, well, I kind of always sort of wanted to do it this. I always wanted to do it this way. I can't do a very good George Lucas. But, I mean, obviously in that case they did it in order to make more money. This way they're doing it so they don't have to spend money. So it's a different motivation. But still, if you're seeing a thing, you want to see the thing as it originally aired. It's like changing format for things. It's why it was so hard to go from a movie theater to the old 4x3 televisions we used to have when you bought a VHS. Unless you were cool and you were able to find a widescreen VHS, in which case you just had to squint because it took up so little of the screen. In any case, you should be able to soon get Constantine on DVD or Blu-ray. You just won't be able to hear it the way it originally aired. And finally, in DC news, another new television show, because comics are coming to TV, kids. They've been making big bucks in the movies, so it's inevitable, really. But the series that we are getting, potentially, that's in development, is Black Lightning, which is, again, from Greg Berlanti, along with, and I'm going to hopefully pronounce this correctly, Mara Brock Akil and her husband Salim Akil, or Mara Brock Akil. So Mara Akil is the creator of The Game and Being Mary Jane, both things I have never seen, but here's the pitch for the show. Quote, Black Lightning centers on Jefferson Pierce. He made his choice. He hung up the suit and his secret identity years ago. But with a daughter hell-bent on justice and a star student being recruited by a local gang, he'll be pulled back into the fight as the wanted vigilante and DC legend, Black Lightning. There you go. You will note that very specific language, DC legend, so I would not be surprised, especially the fact that he's left his secret identity years ago. So I would not be surprised to see a backdoor pilot in DC's Legends of Tomorrow, where maybe they travel back in time when he was active, and then we see him again in the modern day coming out of retirement. A last bit of news on the Black Lightning series, sort of like the previously mentioned New Warriors from Marvel, this show is not specifically attached to any network, so it is not attached to the CW, and it's being shopped around to multiple networks. So if that's the case, I suppose that means that maybe it doesn't get a backdoor pilot from Legends of Tomorrow. You know, the same way that Supergirl sort of very specifically did not exist in the same universe as The Flash and Arrow because it was on another network. So maybe I'm wrong about that whole thing, and I just wasted your time. Take that, listener. Indie comics and movies and whatever, things not from the big two. First up, we have news from Valiant Comics. Michael Rowe, the actor who played Deadshot on the Arrow TV show, will be playing Ninjak, a British playboy who is secretly a ninja spy, in an upcoming web series. The series will also reportedly star Green/White Ranger, Jason David Frank, but his role is being kept secret for right now, though rumor has it that he might be playing Bloodshot, a former soldier who was injected with nanites that give him a variety of powers, including superhuman strength, speed, healing, and shapeshifting. If it sounds like I read that off of the page, I did, because I don't read either Ninjak or Bloodshot. The only Valiant comic I have ever touched was Quantum and Woody, and they don't publish that anymore, which is a shame. Also, sort of an interesting bit of news, Paul Jenkins and Leela Lees released a comic this week called Alters, which is the first book, or at the very least, the first to get major media attention, that features a transgender hero as its lead. The main character, Charlie Young, is in the process of secretly, her folks don't know, transitioning from male to female, and then finds out that she is one of these alters, which is what they're calling them, but folks who are finding out that they have superpowers. So kind of the theme is now this is going to be a character that has two secret identities that she's going to have to try and keep under wraps. First, the fact that she is transgender, and second now, the fact that she is a hero named Chalice. So look for that. That actually came out this week. Maybe go pick it up. If you do, certainly let me know what you think. The book, again, is called Alters. And lastly, the 28th Annual Eisner Awards took place on August 22nd, and these are sort of like the Oscars for comic books. The ceremony was hosted by John Barrowman, who is the Dark Archer on Arrow. Why is his actual name escaping me? Oh, Malcolm Merlyn. Duh. So he plays Malcolm Merlyn on Arrow, and then he was also on Doctor Who, and then the spin-off of Doctor Who, right? But in any case, John Barrowman apparently came out at one point during the show in a Squirrel Girl outfit and twerked at the audience. I don't know if there's a YouTube video of that. I did not look for it. But if you are a John Barrowman fan, you can certainly look at that. If you are a Squirrel Girl fan, you might want to think a second before you want to see John Barrowman twerking in a Squirrel Girl outfit. But I'm guessing somebody's probably going to have that somewhere. In the show notes of this show, you will find a link to comicbook.com where they have a full list of the winners, but I did want to draw attention to a couple just because they're things that you may have heard of on this podcast. First of all, the best new series of 2016 is one we will be reviewing this week, Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chiang. In addition, Cliff Chiang received the award for Best Penciler for Paper Girls. The best limited series is The Fade Out by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. I don't know if I've mentioned that or not. I have not read it, but I have mentioned Ed Brubaker in the past as the guy who wrote the long Captain America run that included the Winter Soldier storyline, and I don't know if I've ever mentioned that he co-wrote Gotham Central with Greg Rucka. That's an awesome book too, though. But I just want to bring that up because it's their best limited series. The best continuing series is Southern Bastards by Jason Aaron and Jason Latour. Jason Aaron, of course, a writer I am a large fan of, which seems to be a popular opinion because he also won Best Writer for his work on Southern Bastards, Men of Wrath, Doctor Strange, Star Wars, and Thor. The best single issue / one-shot was Silver Surfer number 11, Never After, by Dan Slott and Michael Allred. I believe last week I gushed over the most recent issue of Silver Surfer. The last award I just wanted to bring up was the best cover artist was given to David Aja, who did the Hawkeye, and I'm guessing it's Aja, it's AJA. So unless it's David AJ, but he did the Hawkeye run that I really like, and it's true. He's a really great penciler, and his cover designs are really just fun. They're just fun to look at. Each one is a poster unto itself. So link in the show notes if you want to see all of the winners. There are all sorts of cool other awards in there. And that is it for news. Which means yow bow ba ba bow ba ba bow. It's time for reviews. Hey. We're going to start with Doctor Strange number 11, written by Eisner Award winner Jason Aaron. This issue kind of feels like the most recent season of Buffy. It's the start of sort of a new arc, or I want to say maybe it said the new arc starts next issue. So this serves as sort of a bridge, where at the end of the last arc, magic has all but been removed from the world, so now it's very slowly returning. It's referenced in the book as being sort of like right after you mow and the grass starts growing again, or something along those lines. Most of Doctor Strange's library has been destroyed. Most of the spells he knows don't work anymore, so he's still just trying to kind of figure out what he does now. Interestingly, this sort of concurrently runs, almost like Wonder Woman, with kind of his origin story. We find him back when his hands are still broken, and he even tries mutant growth hormone to temporarily gain a power in order to try and heal his hands, but it doesn't work, and it's from there that we find he starts his search for magic in the world. I don't know if that's going to continue, if we're going to continually get sort of a revamped origin, but there's some really cool stuff in here. Since he doesn't have all the fancy magic, he literally goes to battle with a creature with a baseball bat wrapped in enchanted barbed wire. So it's very much that like, all right, everything strips down, we're going back to basics. I almost thought I was going to hop off after the last arc. I thought it was fine, but it wasn't one of those like, I love this book, I must read it month to month. But I don't know, dude. It's seeing him just constantly getting beaten up by these other entities because all he has is a baseball bat to fight him with. It's pretty cool. Doctor Strange number 11, I'm still on board. This might be a good introductory comic if you haven't read the series up to this point, because they do a little recap paragraph on the front page, as many comics do these days, and then you can kind of gauge what's happening from this story. There's a couple things where you'd be like, I don't understand, why is there a head in a jar? It's magic, just roll with it, and you'll be okay. Similarly, Moon Knight number 6. I have no idea what's happening in this. I just have no idea what the heck is happening in this book, and that's the point. It's jumping back and forth between, I guess, different realities, or at least realities within Mark Spector's mind. Each one is done in a completely different art style. Look, this book has totally gone off the deep end. It kind of was doing that with the first 5 issues, where you didn't know if everything happening was all in his head, if he was actually in a mental institution, if everything has always been all in his head. And so it's weird, man. But again, I think that's the point. I think the point is we are meant to be just as confused as he is. But here's the thing. It's been 6 issues of the confusion already. I'm on board. I'm enjoying the ride. But I'm going to need some sort of clarity soon. I don't think I could sit for 150 issues, or even 12 issues maybe, of a book this confusing. I love Moon Knight. I love the idea that they're taking this sort of take on the idea of his mental illness, and that's cool. It's just making me feel lost every single month isn't pushing me to pick up the next issue. It's not to the point where it's like, I have no idea what's going on, I have to get the next issue. It's, I have no idea what's going on, I hope you clarify it soon, because I don't know how much longer I can hang on. Like, it's Moon Knight, it's one of those series I always read, but it's a bad situation where you're reading the book because you always read the book and not because you're super excited to get the next issue. Moving on, Paper Girls number 9, winner of the 2016 Eisner Award for Best New Series and Best Artist. I also have no idea what's going on in this book. It is incredibly convoluted. It feels like any questions I have while reading the book will never be answered, and they just keep throwing out new stuff. But in this case, it is still a narrative that's pushing forward, where Moon Knight, I have really no idea what the heck is happening, and we could find out all of it has taken place in 5 seconds. Like, I wouldn't put it past them to do, it was a dream, and it was a half-hour nap on the couch kind of thing. Where Paper Girls, the plot is definitely moving forward. It's just we are learning the details as the cast of the book do, and very weird things keep happening. Lots of questions. It's still a fun book. I'm still enjoying it. There's a reason it's the best new series. There's a reason that it got the award for Best Artist. So pick up Paper Girls, but I would honestly say go to the library, go to the comic store, pick up the first volume first, just to start wrapping your head around things, because you feel like you know what's happening in the book, and it just takes a sharp left-hand turn, and then another, and then another, and then another. I guess at that point you're going in a circle. You get what I'm saying. It's a very confusing book, but it's fun all the same. Lastly, for my reviews this week is The Walking Dead 158. This is part 2 of 6 of the Whisperer War. And things are getting real here, kids. The Whispers and their army of zombies. The Whispers, as a quick review, are a group of survivors, of course, because everybody's sort of a survivor in this post-apocalyptic zombie-filled world. But what they do is they skin zombies and wear the zombie skin themselves, which I know is so creepy. But they do that so that the zombies then don't attack them. So they actually live within a horde of zombies and are surrounded by these zombies because to them that is the safest place for them to be. And now they are headed for Alexandria. Spoilers, 3, 2, 1.5. 1, okay, spoilers. There is another big death in this one, as Gabriel, the preacher who's been around since issue, I don't know what, before 100, it's like 60-something, I think. He injures himself. He is on watch duty. He is up in a water tower. He hurts himself trying to climb down to alert the others, and then he is killed by the big, I think Beta is the dude's name, but the sort of defunct current leader of the Whisperers, because Alpha, their actual leader, was killed by Negan. Spoilers. So Gabriel is gone, so we lose another, I guess, main character. But this book has become so almost overwhelmed with characters. It has a Game of Thrones kind of thing where you're trying to see what's happening to everybody in several different settlements of people as real things are happening and everybody else doesn't know it yet, so we're still sort of both warming up to the war while already experiencing the war, and I don't remember who half of the people are. Again, it's an issue where I have trouble month to month, but I'm still enjoying it. I'm still on board. It's The Walking Dead, and it's a good book. I would not say this is your jumping on point, certainly, but at the same time, reading 158 issues of a book to catch up is a bit of a daunting task. But you might be able to read like a Wikipedia, quick article. That's one of the things I like to do in order to catch up on things. But anyway, that is reviews. Jabapow, japadoo, dapabadoo, 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 dibadibidabapum, pull list. So here's what I have coming up for next week. First, on the Hoopla app, I am slowly working my way through book 1 of Nightfall, which is that story that introduces Bane to the Batman universe, and it's the story where he eventually breaks Batman's back. I'm digging that. I really do like their outside of the costume, which, let's face it, it works because it's a comic book, but in modern times and modern costume design, his outfit is a little silly, and you're wondering why he chooses to dress like that. But beyond that, I do love their take on Bane, and it is much more compelling, certainly, than some of the other versions we've had. It is the closest to the animated version, where he is intelligent, he does know what he's doing, but he also doesn't have the weird thing where you see his lips, which was kind of weird in the animated one. But in any case, I'm reading that on Hoopla. The other thing I downloaded on Hoopla was Crisis on Infinite Earths, but it's not split up as well. It doesn't zoom in as well on the individual panels. So just on my little iPhone, it's really a pain to read, so I might drop it. I've always wanted to read it. I never have. I just might have to find a better way to read that book than on my phone. As far as comic books next week, it is a DC-heavy week in that I have 3 books from DC, and that's it. First, a double dose of Green Lantern. We're getting Green Lanterns number 6 and Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps number 4, and then Wonder Woman number 6. My archive pick for the week is actually a podcast, and I haven't spoken to anyone over there, but this was suggested to me by Void over at the Geek to Geek podcast, and he's like, hey, have you heard about this podcast called We Can Do This All Day? Of course, the answer was no, and they had only had a couple of episodes out. It's by a podcast, I guess, network called Story Wonk, which I had never heard of before. They mentioned that they have a Buffy podcast called Dusted. I really like this podcast. They're going chronologically with every Marvel property. So right now they're in the MCU, and then eventually I guess they're going to do individual episodes on every episode of Agent Carter and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In every case, they give you a little bit of backstory on the comic history behind the movie. They give you the production history, and then they go into detail, of course, on the story, and they have really good conversations. They consider themselves story experts, and then they grade it on what they call the Iron Standard. So it's 3 different categories, where 1 out of 5, and a 3 is Iron Man, which they consider a very good movie. So right now, this latest episode that I'm in the middle of listening to is on the Avengers, and it's just really good. I enjoy listening to their take, and I think that they're intelligent and well-spoken enough that it's not just people sitting around a table talking about what they liked and didn't like about a movie, which is what you're going to get from this podcast when we record, specific movie episodes. But in their case, they're really digging into the story, and as a film nerd and a story nerd, I'm enjoying it. So go check that out. It is a podcast called We Can Do This All Day. Dap-doo, dap-doo, topic of the week. All right, so full disclosure, this is actually the 3rd time that I have recorded this topic of the week. I just keep redoing it because I want to make sure that it doesn't sound too, angry. But basically, my topic of the week this week is the opposite of last week's topic of the week. Last week I talked about how when you're getting a little too full of nerd rage that you should stop and look around and see how much cool stuff out there is for comic book fans or geeks of all kind to buy and to purchase and to have. Things we totally didn't have when I'm saying our generation, my generation, I'm 31, when we were kids. So this week I'm going to talk about the opposite of that, which is what happens when people try to take a property that is very specifically made for a certain demographic and try and turn it into something that's very 4-quadrant or for everybody. The examples from this week's episode would be Ghost Rider on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., how they're like, well, we're going to take our own spin on it because we want to surprise comic book audiences. But the whole thing is, it's not surprising when you give us a different origin. It's just generally upsetting. It's like you have your Spider-Man origin and everybody knows the origin, and then when they're like, nope, just kidding, it was actually Sandman that killed Uncle Ben. You're like, well, that kind of ruins it, Or I'm sure for original fans of before the 89 Batman, they're like, it was the Joker that killed his parents. Sort of like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose, because the whole point of the character is that it was sort of it was Joe Chill, but a nameless, faceless thug. Therefore, he's going to go out and stop nameless, faceless thugs. Like, that was the whole idea. So you have Ghost Rider on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. You have the upcoming New Warriors, which I'm sure is going to be a vastly different take on the comic. And then there was also Constantine, which we talked about this week, as well as Lucifer, which, to be fair, I have never watched. I'm trying to think if I may have watched part of the pilot, but the idea that they took a Vertigo book that was a spin-off of Sandman and turned it into a procedural cop show. So it's not about Lucifer deciding what he's going to do after he leaves hell and sort of this interesting story where he goes about his own thing. He visits other versions of the underworld. He goes into creating his own universe to see what it would be like if there were no ruling deities telling you what you have to and can't do and that sort of thing. And instead, he's just the devil, but it's a cop procedural where he helps the LAPD. When I read that, it was just so mind-bogglingly stupid to me. So my topic of the week this week, again, it's the opposite of last week, so I still encourage stepping back and looking around and seeing all of the cool stuff that's out there. But at the same time, I feel we are entitled to be upset. When I talk about, living in a golden age, don't think that I'm not hearing you guys, because I still sort of have my own sort of pet peeve properties where I read all of Constantine. And then I saw the first couple episodes of the show, and he's in Georgia for some reason. He's in Atlanta for some reason. And it's sort of this procedural, it felt like a procedural cop show thing. And it's like, Constantine should not be a monster of the week. Lucifer should not be a monster of the week. These things do not belong on American network procedural television. They deserve the Walking Dead treatment. They deserve the Preacher treatment. They should be on AMC or HBO. If you're taking shows like The Flash or Supergirl, that makes sense. You know, like they can have longer arcs, but in general, those books were always written as sort of one-and-dones or in small arcs. But some of these other, especially darker stories, darker characters, things that are more adult, I feel like they just, should get a little more time to tell their stories. They should be hour-long. They can still be funny, I guess, if they want them to be, but I feel like they would work better in that format. Now, that said, not to backtrack at all, because I certainly stand by what I'm saying there, it is an absolute miracle anytime a television show or a film gets made, and it is true that usually it ends up being nothing like what was originally envisioned because it has to go through so many filters of studio heads and rewrites and other writers and executive producers and all these people with their finger on the button that will stop everything in its tracks, and you need to appease those people. So, yes, to be fair, I understand, but at the same time, I very much look forward to the Justice League Dark animated film because they seem to be able to do what they want in a good way, and I'm curious if this Dark Universe movie ever gets off the ground. That's supposed to be sort of the Justice League Dark film, but really, if you're gonna try to adapt a horror comic book, do not do it on network television, because I don't feel like that's the place for that to happen. And so that is my topic of the week. I want to know what you guys think as always. So hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on email, send me an email. I want to talk to you guys about this because I want to know if I'm alone in this. Certainly, I'm guessing not, because Constantine did not last more than a single season, so clearly it wasn't a thing everybody jumped to. But again, I want to know what you guys think. So that information is coming right now. That is it for this week, guys. As always, hit me up on Twitter. I am at Noby, at KNOWBY. I am on the internets with an email account at thecomicboxpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, I am part of the Geek to Geek podcast, so head over to geektogeekcast.net. You can sign up for updates on all of our shows, and check this out. This just happened between me recording the usual show stuff and this third recording of my topic of the week, which, boy, I hope I did a better job this time around, but, we'll see. I'm not doing it a fourth time. Third time's the charm. But those folks over there, Void and Beach, started a YouTube channel. So head over to YouTube, search for the Geek to Geek podcast, and if that's the place where you prefer to get your podcast, or if you have friends and that's where they prefer listening to podcasts, you can do that on YouTube now. We are looking into maybe adding the other Geek to Geek podcasts on there, possibly mine, where it'll all be on the same channel, and then you can just go to a playlist and listen to which shows you want to listen to. But be sure to go check that out. And as always, you are listening to this here, I am guessing, either on Google Play or Stitcher or iTunes. I would love a rating or a review from you guys. I know I ask for it every week, but that is because it is so very important to the podcast and to me to not only hear what you guys think, but the more ratings and reviews I get, the more people can find my podcast, which then helps us expand the conversation with other geeks. And that is the way we like to do it. So that is it for this week. I'm closing the comic box, and we will see you guys next time. Bow ba doo doo bow, ba 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 doo bow, ba 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 doo bow, ba ba da ba da ba da ba doo on, don't you on to don't doo dum the comic books. We like the shows you put out on the TV, but not when you do them wrong. Doo 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 wow. And guys, I'm not even gonna wait. I usually pause before I go into my little epilogue thing. Moo, you thought I forgot about Moo, but I didn't. We said last week we would tell you what it is this week, and it is Monsters Unleashed from Marvel. It was a comic book or possibly magazine that they put out in the 70s that was just all sorts of horror stories. It had Man-Thing, and I think Werewolf by Night possibly, or even Dracula. There was also the Tomb of Dracula comic that Marvel had for a long time. So they are bringing some of those back. I don't know if it's just for October or a Halloween thing, or if they're actually getting into the monster biz again, which would be pretty cool. I'm down for that. So, Moo, Monsters Unleashed. You have your answer. Go forth and read comics.